This week on Break It to Make It.
Often when we are working super hard and ignoring our family, which is one of our core values, it can be because we think we're doing it for them,
Yes.
but what happens is we're actually doing it to them. Right? So we think we're working harder. And once we get to that next level, then we can spend more time, more quality time, or whatever it may be. So we have this belief system that drives our behavior. It's that mindset component.
Hello and welcome back, everybody, to Break It to Make It, where we meet fabulous people who've thrown out the rulebook, failed forwards, taken the road less traveled to come out on top, or who have amazing stories that we can learn of to just look a little bit differently at life. So, does the word no taste funny coming out of your mouth? Have you ever struggled to say no? Does it feel like you're not allowed to say no? For every yes or no that we choose to put out into the world, we're setting these invisible boundaries that really shape our freedom, our choices, our opportunities, and especially our most important relationships. And so today, we are going to discover why no isn't a four-letter word, and in fact, why it's a requirement to intentionally and consistently move us closer to the vision that we have for our life and the relationships that we lead. To help us unpack it all, today's guest helps leaders and entrepreneurs create a saner approach to success. A 5-time entrepreneur, her clients call her the hand-holding ass kicker because she matches just the right amount of push with a dose of love to bring clarity, curiosity, and a healthy sense of humor to all that she does. Please welcome to the show, Lisa Danforth.
Thank you, Fallon. I'm super excited for this conversation.
Thank you. Me too. I'm so excited to hear from you. And I know that we've had the opportunity to meet each other a couple of times before this. And I wanted to start with, why do people struggle saying no? I know it's something that I've personally struggled with in the past, but why do people struggle? Why is it so hard?
I think that's such an amazing question because it is difficult no matter at what level. It really is a muscle that we need to build. There's a lot of different reasons. There's two that I really focus on. And one is that we have such an inherent need as a human to belong, right? So when we say no, it can feel really divisive. It can feel separating. It can feel really hard. So we'll do anything to feel that belonging, including fitting in and stepping over our boundaries. And it can just be super difficult. So when we can understand that, it allows us to step forward and really look at where would boundaries support us. Here's the thing that I love to share that's always sort of a surprise is studies show that people who are the most compassionate are also the most boundaried, because boundaries keep them out of resentment. They're clear on what they're saying yes to and no to, and that keeps them out of resentment so they can stay and be compassionate for themselves and for others. And another reason is we've just been told from a very young age, for most of us, what we can do, what we can't do, where the yeses, nos, boundaries, all of that. And we're sort of like a radio frequency, receiving all of these different ways of expectations. So we live into this expectation and belief about ourselves without even questioning it. And it's the lens through which we see and experience life. And when we understand that it's a lens that we can take off and look through a different lens, try a different color, it starts to shift things.
I love that. And I heard a quote once, and I cannot remember who to correctly attribute it to, but I heard somebody say that people actually like boundaries because when they know where the walls are, they know where the door is.
Yes.
And I thought that was something really, really nice to say. As you were talking, I heard something that I want to scratch on a little bit. You talked about the impact of saying no, and I want to dig into that a little bit, but you said the impact of not saying no is that you have some of your boundaries violated. But can you talk a little bit more about the impact of not saying no?
The impact of not saying no is the resentment piece, right? Like it is completely that impacts us. I was just having a conversation today with someone who is saying yes to all of these things, are doing more than what they want to do. And that creates resentment within us. The impact of not saying no, and you said that in the intro, is our yeses and our nos create our future. So whatever we're saying yes to and prioritizing, that means that we need to deprioritize something else. The problem with that being, if we are someone who has difficulty saying no, we're prioritizing someone else's goals, someone else's vision, and it's much harder to achieve our goals, whatever they are, to achieve this success, whatever we seek, right? Whatever success is for us, when we are allowing other people's priorities to step ahead of ours. So then we can start feeling like a failure, feeling like we don't have what it takes either to set boundaries or to do the work. It really gets in our way, and it messes with our head, and it messes with our mindset, truly.
You're talking about some really strong feelings there, some resentment. It's messing with our overall vibe. We feel disoriented. How people like to believe that they're self-aware, right? But we all have our blind spots. If somebody hears you saying, okay, resentment, they might say, well, I don't have resentment. I'm fine. But how could somebody, if they were looking for words that they might use, language, neurolinguistics around, oh, maybe I'm feeling some resentment, how does that show up in life? And how could somebody recognize it in themselves?
Excellent question. Here's the thing. Our bodies tell us when we are stepping over our boundaries, when we're behaving and acting in a way that's out of alignment with who we are and where we want to be. It shows up in our body. So it might be your shoulders come up, your stomach clenches, your hands clench, you check out, whenever it may be. There are ways that our body actually speaks to us. I think when we are agitated, it shows up somewhere in our body. When we start to pause and become in tune to that feeling, that's the trigger. Okay, wait a minute. My teeth are clenched. Okay, my hands are clenched, or I'm like this. That's the trigger that we can then notice and say, all right, I get to choose differently. Whether it's a yes or a no, or a can you get back to me, our bodies will truly tell us. You might feel overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, one more thing on my plate. That is a huge feeling that a lot of people get, is that overwhelm, almost burnout feeling, because they're adding more to their plate. Boundaries can feel really overwhelming to set, but we get to choose which type of overwhelm that we would rather live with. The overwhelm of establishing the boundaries in the moment and the ease moving forward, or moving forward with the overwhelm of continually adding more to our plate.
Something that I've carried with me for a long time, a mentor of mine, his name is Oscar Trombolin, probably about 17 years ago, he said to me, if you find yourself in conflict and you have an emotional reaction, you can feel yourself having an emotional reaction to it, more often than not, it means that there's a values conflict within you. And I always think to myself, if I feel my emotions being inflamed, what's the value that is being trodden on in this situation? How do you feel about the relationship between values and boundaries?
I feel very strongly about that, because when the values, when we're stepping over our value of who we are, what's important to us, we can often tell when we are violating our own boundaries by not prioritizing them and speaking up for them, because we get a little pissy, right? So there's a direct connection, and that's the resentment piece. The thing is, most people don't know their boundaries. They don't know their boundaries, but they don't know their core values, and that is essential. I always like to say our vision is where we're heading. Our values are how we get there. And when we don't live into our values, my core values in order are growth, compassion, and respect. So I can pause and be able to say, if growth is truly my number one value, what would my choice in this moment be? Would it be to say yes? Would it be to say no? Would it be to stay quiet? We get to align our choices, our actions, and our inaction with our core values. If for anyone listening, I highly recommend you do a little core values work and see what you can come up with, because they're great guiding lights.
Absolutely. And so many people find themselves in jobs, working for organizations And they might spend time thinking about the great perks.
Mhm.
They don't spend a lot of time thinking about what are the values of the organization and what are the values of the people that I'm going to be working with. And then it looks great on paper, but then they get there and they realize that they're a square peg in a round hole because they haven't done that values work, and all of a sudden everything is uncomfortable. Just doesn't feel right. How does somebody do values work? How do you figure out what your core values are?
So there's so many different ways that you can do values. I have a download on my site, which I can give you. You can put in the show notes, so I won't state it here, but there's all sorts of different ways. What I recommend is if you Google values, there's so much stuff out there. I say take the list when you find one, just print it off, look through, check, circle any value that calls to you, X off any that does not, combine any under higher level. So let's say you really want to eat better, exercise more, and drink more water. That would go under a wellness value. So truly getting so what you do is sort of separate them out, get a little more clear on them, and then you date them. You take them out on a date. You know, what does this value look like to me? A great way to do this is, how do I emulate this value in my life? If courage is truly a value, if empathy, respect, whatever it may be, authenticity is often a very true value. If authenticity is a value, my core value, how do I emulate that in my day-to-day life? And what happens when I don't honor that value? So the key is to pause and look at, where is it showing up in my life? Are my choices in alignment with this core value? And when I'm not honoring it, what do I feel like? What's happening? What is my life like? Now, that sounds like it could take hours. It literally, once you've done a little bit of that core values work, it literally only takes a minute to sort of pause, ask the question, and then move forward from that space because you're clear.
I imagine for some people, going through that process and then auditing their life against their values, it may be amazing for some people, but for some people, I imagine it could be quite uncomfortable or confronting. I think about my core values and some of the way that I have lived my life, which inadvertently ends up in complete conflict with my personal values. So one of my personal values is family, honesty, integrity, family, and fun. Those are my core values. And just through the course of my work and things that I do, sometimes I find myself not prioritizing my family, even though it's my core value, or I'm decidedly not having fun. And then I'm like, okay, how can we bring the joy and the fun back into this situation? So I love that, and I'm really interested for folks to go and have that download. And if you haven't taken the time, knowing that about yourself is absolutely important.
Can I just jump in and say, often when we are working super hard and ignoring our family, which is one of our core values, it can be because we think we're doing it for them. Yes. But what happens is we're actually doing it to them. Right? So we think we're working harder. And once we get to that next level, then we can spend more time, more quality time, or whatever it may be. So we have this belief system that drives our behavior. It's that mindset component. So often we try to change a behavior. You know what? I am going to make 75% of my kids' soccer games this season, right? But we don't look at the belief that's driving the behavior that has us saying yes to the work, saying yes to other things, which means we need to deprioritize our core values. So there's sometimes conflicting values. Like, I really love freedom, but I love financial stability, right? So I've had clients who have this, and then so there's this conflict which keeps them in this struggle. So when you can actually tease out what those core values mean to you, yes, financial is great, but the financial stability helps create that freedom and flexibility over here. So your choices here impact here. Same thing with your family.
That's so true. And that resonates with me deeply, because I can always justify the decision to myself. I mean, can't we all? It's always a good reason why I'm doing this. I'm doing it for them. But I love the way that you phrase it, which is, you end up doing it to them. And I've really seen that come through in the way that my children react to me and some of the feedback that they've given me. They are not going to remember, did I sell that deal? Did I do this thing? They're not going to remember how much money I did or didn't make running my own business in 2022, but they are going to remember, did we go to Spirit Halloween twice that weekend? Because I'm a Halloween super fan, and my mum took me, every single day to Spirit Halloween and didn't let me buy everything, but I got to push all the buttons. They'll remember that. They'll remember that because they love that. Did my mum track down every single book of Demon Slayer because I'm really into reading that, and I read multiple books of those a day? That sort of stuff that's what they'll remember.
And ask them. And here's the thing that we forget is ask them. We think as parents that we need to spend 24/7 with our kids and do all the bake sales and be the scholastic book club, like all of these things. Have 3/4 of the stuff that we feel like we need to do isn't important to them. So if you're feeling overwhelmed and you're having a hard time establishing boundaries, ask them what's most important for you, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your kids, whether it's your friends. And I would implore you to ask yourself too, what's most important to me? What is my choice in this moment going to create in my life? And this all comes back to boundaries. This all comes back to being the ability to say, no, we cannot have the success we seek without boundaries. We cannot have the work-life balance that we seek without boundaries. And we can't have healthy, authentic relationships without boundaries. They're all intertwined.
I love that. The concept of involving others, especially if you have a core value around family. But, we started this whole conversation around boundaries are important for your most important relationships. And everybody has boundaries and everybody has priorities. We started 2 years ago as a family. We don't necessarily do New Year's resolutions, but we come up with a New Year family plan where we all sit around the table and we come up with goals, like what would we like to do? And one that we set for this year was we wanted to eat dinner together every single night if we could.
Mm-hmm.
And our kids wanted to have one fancy dinner a week. So whether or not it's going out to a nice restaurant and trying something new, or whether it's cooking something interesting and new at home, where we try a new recipe, or in Australian and English culture, the Sunday roast is a really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So that one thing, prioritizing that and making that has made such a huge difference to our family because that's our thing. And so if people haven't tried it, that's something that's really worked for us. But do you have other examples of how people can integrate that conversation or that process, other tools that people can use to, I don't know, create a shared plan with their people?
Are there tools invite people to the conversation? Again, we make such assumptions that we need to show up a certain way, that someone else is unhappy. Ask. Just pause and ask. Give the gift of transparency. If you've always sort of made the decision or you've always shown up a different way and you want to start showing up differently, invite the people to the conversation. I know I've always done this, but I feel like it's not working. How can we sit down and make a plan that's going to work for us? We like to make things so difficult as humans. It's really easy. It's not easy. It's very simple, but it's not often easy. And this is where we truly get tripped up. I should be able to do this, right? I know that I was going to be home with my kids. Why did I take this on? And then we start beating ourselves up. Then we start losing self-trust. We lose belief in ourselves, confidence in ourselves, and it's a vicious cycle. And it comes back to this mindset, this belief system. But it's be curious. Show yourself some compassionate curiosity. Bring the graceful accountability. Don't beat yourself up. Don't let yourself off the hook. We need to pause and step back and look at what is most important to me. What do I want to know from this person? Who do I want to be? That clarity is going to allow you, whether it's clarity for yourself or clarity for the ones around you, it's going to allow you to show up differently. But if you don't ask, you're not going to know. And then people eventually stop coming and checking on you and ask. That was happening with my kids. They'd come and say, Mom, can we go bake some cookies? Or can we go and do this? I'd say, just 10 more minutes, just 10 more minutes. And when they wouldn't come back, I'd be like, score, I can get some more done. But here's the thing, they eventually stopped coming back because they lost trust that I would actually stop and be with them. there was no boundary at my work. I was doing it for them. I was doing it to them. And that was not okay. So again, pause, get clear, look at who you're being and what you want, and invite other people to that conversation.
That's such a profound thing. And thank you for sharing that story. I'm sure that people's heads are nodding off their shoulders right now because there's so many of us that can relate to that. And if they haven't experienced that yet, that might just be the wake-up call that people need to think, wow, I want to make sure that they come back, so I need to make a change. So many times I've found myself going into a conversation going, I'm going to say no, I'm going to say no, I'm going to say no. And I walk out having the words yes. No,
exactly.
No,
You're like, yes, I'd love to. I'm shaking my head now, by the way, if
Yeah.
anyone's on the podcast.
I would love to do that.
And then you walk away going, I cannot believe they just asked me that, right? You're like, that's the resentment piece.
Walking away going, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you. So is there a right way and a wrong way to say no? Because I think sometimes we don't have the right words or the right tools, or we don't feel like we have the right finesse to say no in a way that can remove the risk, you know? For us, is there a right way? Is there a wrong way? What advice do you have for people who can't get the words out?
Well, I mean, there's always a risk, right? You could piss someone off, or you could completely morph your life and not have what you want. Like there's always a choice, right? So there's two things. Your boundaries are about you. They are not about other people. So if you set a boundary and someone else isn't honoring it, that is on you. I lovingly call you out on this. Whoever's listening, right? Your boundaries are about what you will do and won't do. They are not about other people. It's not their responsibility. It's yours. Number two, it is your responsibility to be clear, direct, and respectful in your request or your denial or whatever it may be. It is not your responsibility how it lands on the other person. And this is where we can get tripped up. Oh my gosh, I think they're upset. They were miffed. Oh my, they haven't called me back in 3 days. What's going on? It is our responsibility, again, to be clear, direct, and respectful. How it lands on other people, we do not have that control. We don't. Other than if we want to change who we are and prioritize whatever it is they want, because they're uncomfortable or they're a little peeved that we didn't answer them the way that they wanted us to. We get to choose that life. The number one regret, the Bronnie Ware, who's a palliative care nurse traveling across Australia years ago, she would sit with people in the last days, last moments, last breaths of their lives. And she would speak with them. And they found she found that there was always a theme. She wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. The number one regret, I wished I had had the courage to live a life true to myself and not what others had expected of me. I implore everyone listening, set that damn boundary lovingly, compassionately, wrapped in your core values.
It's such a beautiful and sobering book, a great piece of work. It also, when you're speaking, it's reminding me of another thing, which is the difference between being nice and being kind. And that so many of us think that we're doing the right thing or that we're being kind, when really we're being nice and we're prioritizing somebody else. Maybe we're not telling them the whole truth because we think that we are saving their feelings. But what we're really doing is robbing them of the opportunity to have the whole story and then to react however they would have, in essence, by trying to control their feelings or manage their feelings, maybe because we want to protect our own, we're actually robbing them of a real connection and all of the information. And then somehow we all get upset because it's all gotten bent out of shape.
That's the resentment piece. We're also robbing them of growth. We are robbing them of understanding what it's like to show up and be in an authentic relationship when we are continually morphing. A quote by Brene Brown completely changed my life several years ago. Like I remember specifically sitting on a couch, early morning, wintertime, looking out at the water. The lake was frozen. It was all crystally pink because the sun was rising. I had a book in one hand, a coffee in the other. And I read her quote that said, fitting in is the greatest barrier to belonging. And I literally stopped mid-slurp, and I could see my life flash before my eyes, continually morphing to fit in, to make sure that everyone else was happy at my discomfort. We get to choose. We truly get to choose. We may not always like the immediate response by the other person, but are you willing to continually morph yourself and make yourself uncomfortable, doing things you don't want to do to protect the other person? That's not an authentic relationship, is it? Do we really want to be in those types of relationships? It's when we stop and look at that. How do I need to show up in this relationship? Because that person isn't able to do what they need to do if you're not showing up as your authentic self. There's so much control that we're trying to harness that we don't have, and it's ruining a lot of lives. No is not a 4-letter word.
It is not a 4-letter word. And a lot of people, sadly, have a lot of their self-worth tied up in being a yes person. Mm-hmm. They get a lot of their personal sense of self-worth by how other people think and feel and perceive them and validate them. What advice do you have for the yes people out there who are just putting themselves last all the time, but getting that validation and like, I feel good about myself because these people love me, but gosh, I'm so unhappy?
Pause. There is so much power in a pause, right? It could be just a breath. It could be a couple of minutes. Create that space so that you are disrupting those well-worn neural pathways of just that automatic yes. Like you had said before, you walked away like, I can't believe I said yes. So creating that distance to separate yourself from that well-worn neural pathway of yes. It's very simple. It is not easy. And this is where we truly get tripped up. So one thing I recommend if you are a yes person and you really struggle is if someone's asking you to do something, the habit that I would invite you to start building, the muscle, would be that pause. So that you can look at your calendar, you can step back, and when you have more clarity away from the moment, you're able to truly understand if that is what you want to say yes to or no to, if that is what you want to prioritize. And here's the thing, if the person pushes you, let me back up a second. Ask them to get back with you. If they want something of you, say, can you get back with me tomorrow? I want to check my calendar and make sure that I have time for it. Or can you get back with me? Whatever it is, whether it's, in an hour. What happens is if we've always been the yes person, the people know that they can push us and will eventually cave. If the person needs an answer in the moment, here's what I recommend. If you need an answer right now, then I'm afraid it's going to be no. But if you want to get back with me in an hour or tomorrow, I would be more than happy to look at my calendar. You're putting it on them. So if the no isn't what they want, they get to choose to follow back up. And it creates enough of a distance for us to say, you know what, it's going to be hard to say no, but that pause is going to help me prioritize my life. It's going to help me prioritize my family. It's going to help me prioritize my success. Sometimes we say yes knowing it's going to be a discomfort because it's a choice. A friend really needs you. You really don't have the time, but you truly want to help them. That pause helps you with that as well because you're intentionally saying yes rather than reactively saying yes. So in a short comment or short question, I answered it in a very lengthy way, but the thing is pause. Just pause, create that distance.
I love that. And I really think that that's a nice way for us to wrap up our conversation today. It has been an absolute pleasure. As always, I have learned so much from you, and I'm so happy that we get to share you with our listeners. Ladies and gentlemen, Lisa Danforth, let's just pause here for the moment for the power of the pause. If you have been inspired by Lisa today and you want to take that first step, take that time out for yourself. You deserve it. You are worth it. If you would like to learn more about Lisa and you would like to start a journey towards the life that you want, check her out. Check her out on her website, lisadanforth.com, and I highly encourage you to take a peek and maybe sign up for her next Boundaries Boot Camp. Lisa, thank you again. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my mission and my message. Thank you, Helen.